which we have been given. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. We gather together today, bringing our full selves, bringing our questions. Questions like, why do we gather today when it would be so much easier to do something else with our precious time? We gather to ground ourselves in personal practice and communal worship that grows our capacity for wonder and spiritual deepening. We gather to know each other in all of our fullness and to create an ever-widening circle of belonging for all people. Welcome, welcome, welcome to Unity Church-Unitarian, whoever you are, wherever you're from, whether you're watching us online, here in person. Your gifts and your wounds are welcome here. I'm Reverend Kathleen Rolenz. I have the privilege of serving as your interim senior minister, and I'm sharing today's service with Charlie Caswell, Chris Russert, and Isaac Fried, and Ahmed Anzaldua. We are so glad that you are here. And we hope that you find in Unity Church a place that helps you to find and keep your balance, and a community that inspires you to lead a life of integrity, service, and joy. Today is Father's Day, and on this day we honor and recognize the unique and complex role of fatherhood. And so now we invite you to enter into this time of worship with the pealing of our bell.
Good morning. Before I sing the prelude, just a quick introduction. So in the 1970s, my father, his name was Antonio, he went from Mexico City to the UK to get a doctorate at the University of Reading. While he was there, he discovered Islam, and he met my Uncle Muhammad, my mother's dad, and he converted to Islam. At the same mosque where he took all his classes and converted, he met and became very close friends with the singer Cat Stevens. And they converted together, they were lifelong friends. And this song, Father and Son, was a constant in my house, as were most of Uncle Yusuf's songs. So this is a Father and Son. It's not time to make a change. Just relax, take it easy. You're still young. That's your fault. There's so much you have to know. Find a girl, settle down. If you want, you can marry. Look at me. I am old, but I'm happy. I was once like you are now, and I know that it's not easy to be calm when you found something going on. But take your time, think a lot, think of everything you've got, for you will still be here tomorrow, but your dreams may not. How can I try to explain? When I do, he turns away again. It's always been the same old story. From the moment I could talk, I was ordered to listen. Now there's a way, and I know that I have to go away. I know I have to go. It's not time to make a change. Just sit down, take it slowly. You're still young. That's your fault. There's so much you have to go through. Find a girl, settle down. If you want, you can marry. Look at me. I am old, but I'm happy. All the times that I have cried, keeping all the things I knew inside. It's hard, but it's harder to ignore it. If they were right, I'd agree, but it's them, they know, not me. Now there's a way, and I know that I have to go away. I know I have to go.
This is a call to worship by William R. Murray. These are the days that have been given to us. Let us rejoice and be glad in them. These are the days of our lives. Let us live them well in love and service. These are the days of mystery and wonder. Let us cherish and celebrate them in gratitude together. These are the days that have been given to us. Let us make of them stories worth telling to those who come after us. Join with me as we kindle the flame of our chalice. We light our chalice for the example of our faith, the light of truth, and the warmth of love.
518. Grandfather, look at our brokenness.
We know that of all creation, only the human family has strayed from the sacred way.
We know that we are the ones who are divided.
And we are the ones who must come back together to walk the sacred way.
Grandfather, Sacred One, teach us love, compassion, and honor, that we may heal the earth and heal each other. Each time we gather for worship, we set aside a moment to expand the caring ministry of this congregation. And together we recognize the cycle of life and death, the circle of love, compassion, and witness that is at the center of this and every sacred community. We hold in this caring circle joys and sorrows. And we know that there are those among us who are joyfully celebrating the Muslim holiday of Eid al-Adha, which is also known as the Festival of Sacrifice. And this is recalling Father Abraham's obedience to God's command. So we wish, first and foremost, happy Eid to our Muslim siblings this weekend. We also know that there are those among us who are not celebrating, but who may be mourning or grieving. Mourning a loved one who has died recently or is facing their final days, or who, due to illness, is no longer present in the way they once were to share in life's joys. So this morning we have one to hold in our care. Anacleta Martina is grieving the death of her beloved Aunt Doreen White, who died on Tuesday, June 11th, at 99 years of age. For Anacleta, her Aunt Doreen was a lifelong support person and the kindest person she knew. There are perhaps more joys or sorrows on our hearts and minds this morning. So we invite you now to speak aloud the names of those souls that you wish for us to hold in care. Our hearts expand to hold all these truths as we bear witness to one another, as we now enter in a time of spoken and silent prayer. O thou Spirit of life of many names and beyond all naming, be with us now as we contemplate the meaning of this day and the many and diverse ways in which fathers and fatherhood are part of our prayers. We hold love for those who have lost fathers and for those fathers who have lost children. We acknowledge and hold non-binary and transgender and cisgender dads in families made of two dads, and foster and adoptive dads and single dads. We hold and lift up all fathers of color and those fathers raising children of color. we hold in our hearts those fathers kept apart from their children by borders and war. We are holding this day fathers and children who have lost connection, children who have been disowned or abandoned by their fathers, and the father figures who step in. We hold those longing to become fathers. We hold those who may be full of questions about their biological fathers. And on this day, we also hold and give thanks to the dads, the papas, the daddies, and all who show up every day to give their children love and care, compassion and honesty. We know that our human relations are always complicated, and these days of recognition are complex. So we invite you now to take a moment to breathe in that which serves you, nurtures you, sustains you, and breathe out that which does not. We pause now in silent witness to these aspirations. May it be so. This spring, I attended Unity Cafe, which was a wonderful opportunity for members to share their poetry, their music, their gifts. And I was struck by one of the poems that was read by Kim Chapman. And so, Kim, I'm going to invite you to come forward and offer that poem that you read to this congregation. Thank you.
How do you know the good guys? There's a sense you get of nothing to hide and also nothing to prove, as if the world is just as you see it, complicated, not amenable to easy answers, not a wind-up clock or automaton, but an ever-unfolding conversation. In this scenario, people are what they are, certainly self-interested and often good, but also, as in the stories, terribly bad, in the way that the worst storms are bad. Nothing personal, just the playing out of a dice toss from the open hand. Despite all that, You know who the good guys are. I see them pulling hard against the current in those little jumps a rowboat makes with every stroke. Exertion is the all. There is that doubt. The goal is not the goal, but a false reward that pulls magnetically. There is that doubt that strength will not sustain, that weakness, hidden, will undo it all. And that is why I love them, all the rowers. They are the centering gravity pulling us in, riding their wake on a bearing to the good.
If God is male, then male is God. Feminist theologian Mary Daly made that thunderous assertion in 1973, and with it began a movement that influenced progressive churches ever since. That quote was found in her groundbreaking book, Beyond God the Father. And in that book, Daly argued that assigning a gender to God inherently gives men more value than women, which has led to oppression and discrimination. And she traces the way in which patriarchy, as expressed throughout millennia in Jewish and Christian text, has created a culture whereby women are systematically oppressed, all under the banner of religion. In most Trinitarian Christian churches, prayers are lifted up to God the Father, Jesus the Son, and the Holy Spirit, with God as the head of, well, everything. God is understood as the first cause, the creative power, the life giver, the lawgiver, the ultimate source of love and punishment. And beyond all this, God is the Almighty who rules over all creation, who will prosper your work and defend you. As we sang in that rocking great hymn, Praise be to God the Almighty. Thank you for indulging me in singing that hymn, which I love. But fast forward a couple centuries to Jesus, who related differently to Yahweh, to God. Jesus was known to call upon his relationship with God by saying Abba, similar to the way a child would address their father, like daddy or papa. And this interpretation of God de-emphasizes God the Father as lawgiver and punisher, but turns God into a more intimate relationship, one that is characterized by tenderness and affection. So, it may seem a little odd to some of you then to begin this homily with an excursion into a God that many of us have likely abandoned a long time ago. And I would venture to say that most contemporary Unitarian Universalists don't conceive of God as their Father. Or if they do, it might be one of many conceptions of God. God as Father, God as Mother, God as Friend, God as Sister. And although, many of us might want to see the famous depiction of God on Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel, they don't really conceive of God as the Father and the old man in the sky with the white beard. But here's the interesting thing about the way religion influences culture. God the Father is a concept that is so embedded in Western culture that we must be very clear about what it is that we are abandoning. Because you still go to any Catholic church today and you're likely to hear those words in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Or a Protestant church praying to our Father who art in heaven. These theological underpinnings of how we conceive of God influence culture. And theology is the study of belief systems. And because religion and spirituality are so intertwined with our secular lives, we cannot ignore its influence on the ways our families are created, the ways our governments are run, the ways in which our identities are shaped. It affects our understanding of gender, of parenting, of what it means to be a man, and what it means to be a father. So our task as religious and spiritual people is to constantly examine, question, and challenge these inherited assumptions. Now, Mary Daly and subsequent feminist theologians after her detailed the harms that patriarchy, that is, male-dominated culture, has done to women. And this is an undeniable fact. I mean, it's hard for me to believe that here in the 21st century, the Southern Baptists, the Missouri Lutheran Synod, and Mormon churches still do not allow women to be ordained or to hold the highest positions of authority. And we do know, this is not to bash the Catholic Church, but male priesthood is an unalterable requirement of God. So it says, not a matter of policy or practice. It is divinely ordained. And that's the position why women are not ordained into the Catholic priesthood. Unitarian Universalists can be proud of the fact that we were early to see the value in female leadership, ordaining Universalist Olympia Brown in 1863. And, you know, I'm equally proud of the fact that Unitarian Universalism has been on the cutting edge of feminist thought for decades, degendering male pronouns in our hymns, creating a language that is inclusive of women, men, trans, gender expansive, and gender nonconforming persons. And in that process, we've learned something about patriarchy. What we've learned about patriarchy is that it does indeed limit, restrict, harm women, trans people, gender nonconforming. And what we are also learning is the ways in which patriarchy, as understood and experienced by centuries of notions about manhood and maleness, how that restricts, limits, hurts, and spiritually disables men from being their fullest selves. Feminism was never about abolishing men. It has always been about challenging culture to a more inclusive and more expansive view, understanding of personhood, unbound from the strict definitions of maleness and fatherhood that has been promulgated by millennia of patriarchy. So as we've said, today is Father's Day, a day when we recognize the complexities of fatherhood, of manhood, even as we challenge the need for gender definition at all. So today, instead of me preaching about maleness and fatherhood, right? That wouldn't quite be authentic. I've asked our 3 new worship associates to reflect on their experience of having a father or being a father, because in our faith tradition, we expect nothing less from each other than the expression of our own experience, the unvarnished truth of our lives. And that includes reflection on our fathers as fabulous and flawed, struggling with their own understandings of fatherhood and maleness. And we owe a debt of gratitude for our trans and gender nonconforming and gender expansive siblings who are modeling for us cisgender persons a path towards living as an authentic self. They are showing us new ways of being a parent, a partner, a father, and that manliness or fatherhood can and does look very different than previous generations. Earlier this year, I watched the film based on the book, The Boys in the Boat. Any of you see the movie? And actually, Rob Eller Isaacs did a brilliant sermon on this book some time ago. But it's a recounting of the Washington rowing team getting into the 1936 Olympics. And underneath the story of all the sweat and triumph is also the story of one of the young men on the team who was abandoned by his father, and of him trying to find his own way as a man in the world. And when Kim Chapman read that poem that you just heard, I thought of the men that I know, my own father included, whose efforts made a difference in my life, whose often unspoken love showed up through their sweat, through their exertion. Recall his words when he wrote, "Despite all that, you know who the good guys are. I see them pulling hard against the current in those little jumps a rowboat makes with every stroke. Exertion is the all. There is that doubt. The goal is not the goal, but a false reward that pulls magnetically. There is that doubt that strength will not sustain, that weakness hidden will undo it all. And that is why I love them, all the rowers. They are centering gravity, pulling us in, riding their wake on a bearing to the good." So we begin now with a reflection from Charlie Caswell.
My father never really had a chance to learn to cultivate me. His father left home when he was very young, and his mother had what were euphemistically called many issues. So he basically had to raise himself in poverty. He was brilliant and put himself through Berkeley and Caltech, served in the Army Air Corps during World War II, ran a chemical lab for the U.S. Department of Agriculture for many years, and led birdwatching trips, including for the National Park Service, into his 80s. But he was always terribly anxious and fearful about just about everything. Anything unanticipated, like me crying or spilling something or coughing or making noise, or him being lost, or hearing something that didn't agree with his worldview, or involving any sort of physical risk, or, heavens, spending money. Any of these and more could set him off running up and down the house swearing loudly. It could happen in public, too. He had the emotional maturity of a 3-year-old his whole life, multiple tantrums every day. In retrospect, I'm sure he was crying out because he had never been cultivated with even a few drops of loving water. As his only child, I lived in constant fear of his tantrums, even well into my adulthood. I was very sickly until I left home. Had you asked me even 20 years ago, I'd have said he did nothing to cultivate me, to help me become a good or loving person. He never fed me, never hugged me, never took me to the doctor, never said, "I love you." And those tantrums. But he was at least in part reflecting male culture of the 1950s and 60s. Women raised kids and were emotional. Men provided income and showed no affection to children. And he was scrupulously honest. He never threatened physical violence against me. He would play card games with me. He would talk about nature and science with me. He exposed me to classical music. He always showed up for my concerts. He let me spend money to travel the world with orchestras and on long educational adventures every year of high school. And every year until I was about 14, we went on 3 to 5 week-long road trips all over the continent, mostly to go bird watching. He provided a comfortable middle-class household, albeit one where spending money for anything was basically a sin. So in the end, although others contributed much, he did help cultivate me into the person I am today. He gave me a physically and financially secure, albeit not emotionally secure, home where I could develop. He transferred his love of music and curiosity about the natural world to me. He showed up. And while he didn't know how to express it, I now know he loved me and was proud of me. When my first child, Adam, died at birth, he was so distraught about how he would never be a grandparent. I have to say, it had never occurred to me that he wanted to be a grandparent, since I hadn't understood until then, due to my constant anxiety about his tantrums, that he wanted to be a parent to me. And when he was in the nursing home in his wheelchair, finally at long last pumped full of anti-anxiety meds and antidepressants, and my 4 little boys would show up, he would light up and was actually able once to say he was happy, the one and only time I ever heard that, as the youngest was put into his lap for his regular wheelchair ride with Grandpa Bob. I have been far from a perfect parent, and I hope my children recover from my shortcomings. But I showed up, I engaged, I never said no to any educational opportunity they showed interest in, and because I craved it so much myself as a child without receiving, I regularly hugged my kids and told them, and still tell them, that I love them. And I hope they feel that's always been unconditional. It has always felt unconditional to me. My boys are such a gift. I hope I've helped cultivate 4 wonderful young men, and I'm very proud of them and always love them, regardless of their accomplishments or struggles. And somehow, miraculously, they all still seem to like me.
My relationship with my father has always involved the meeting of complexity and love. My dad undoubtedly cultivated my sister and me in our passions as we were growing up. I have many fond memories in my childhood of him taking my sister and me to museums to nourish our love of history, or in high school, going the extra mile to coach me as a public speaker, or drive me to drumline practices. His wisdom and humility were known in our community and are something I seek to embody as his son. Yet, while my father was physically present in my life, in many ways, there was always an emotional distance. Emerging from the shadow of abuse in his childhood at the hands of his father, which had occurred for multiple generations in my family, along with grappling with mental health struggles in adulthood, left little understanding of how to be present as a father. I often felt like I had to parent myself. The other significant male figure in my life, my former stepfather, was emotionally abusive. And as a closeted gay teenager, hearing homophobic remarks from both of them caused me pain and diminished my sense of self. Living in the shadow of all of this left me feeling confused and lost in my understanding of manhood. I did not want to continue to perpetrate the harm that I'd experienced, but with what felt like a lack of positive examples in my family, and in the confusing environment young men are thrust into today, I didn't even know where to begin. I have found that healing lies where our connectedness and understanding of our own individual dignity meet. Much of this connection comes from the meaningful relationships we build with others. One of my favorite experiences of this was Unity's Gender and Faith Retreat. At this retreat, I had the opportunity to go deep and share stories with other men, along with women and gender-expansive individuals. Each in their own way helped me broaden my possibilities of what being a man can be. In settings like this, I have learned that when we allow ourselves to be vulnerable with each other, beyond societal performances of who we're supposed to be, that is the space where who we truly are can blossom, and with nourishment by a courageous, welcoming community such as ours, can thrive. I also feel my journey with masculinity and fatherhood mirrors my journey with faith. One of the major draws to unity for me, and I know it is for many others, is the desire to reconcile multiple truths about ourselves. We crave the intimacy and challenge of sacred space, along with the liberty of being accepted for who we are and what we honestly believe. In my case, I have learned that there is room for the Christianity I was raised in, the secular humanism of my young adulthood, and the wisdom of others' spiritual practices and traditions. This muscle of faith has lifted my ability to hold the complexities of my relationship with my Father in love. I can accept the parts that haunt me, while also letting the good in his example inspire me daily. It is possible to feel crushed by the weight of generations of trauma, also knowing that our capacity to harm is matched by our capacity to heal. And to break cycles of harm is a loving act. I may view myself as a man based on who came before me or what surrounds me, but there is a worth and a dignity far deeper than that I can always tap into, and a beloved community that will hold me in compassion and help me flourish. That is the joy of Father's Day for me.
My father is a girl dad. Since the birth of my sister Dana and my own emergence a mere 2 minutes later, he has cherished and challenged and championed girls. When my younger sister Maggie was born in 2005, 4 years after me, it was solidified. My dad was the man of the house, but not because of any masculine superiority. He was just literally the only man in the house. What might be confusing, if you trust your eyes, is that I am presenting as a bit of a dude. What's not necessarily visible or obvious to you is that I am transgender. Growing up, one thing that Dana and I really leaned into was sports. Being a Minnesota family living near outdoor ice, I was offered the game of hockey at the age of 5. On the other side of the Langford Park Rec Center, opposite the tennis courts, the baseball fields were flooded with water every winter to provide St. Anthony Park residents skating opportunities. The hockey rinks, maintained by local volunteers for nearly a century, became my new happy place. My dad became one of the mainstays on the flooding crew while I skated at Langford. And just like in any other sport we played, he cemented himself as the loudest voice in the stands and a leader amongst the parents. He has always stated that getting involved in his children's activities was his avenue for fulfillment in life. My dad grew up in New York City, where the closest thing to a wood-fired sauna is the warmth of an unconditioned subway car. Nowadays, he has built up an array of winter skills. He and my mother recently skied at one of the Birkebeiner races in Wisconsin. And I can recall during the pandemic, when we had escaped up north to our cabin, he made a conference call mid-trek while we embarked on a snowshoe across the frozen lake. I also remember him tripping and falling countless times in the snow or ice, on skates, on skis, and on snowshoes. He even broke his thumb while attempting to ski down the hill and onto the lake in one go. The fall itself was anticlimactic, and luckily he is just fine. He's funny in that way, clumsy but lucky, and quite good-natured about it. Good-natured clumsiness is one way to describe how my parents responded to my transition. It's sort of how I started the process myself. I will not claim that I knew enough about myself early on to make a definitive and graceful coming out story. My own journey was more of a stopping and starting and relearning and clarifying and deciding slowly over time who I wanted to be. Appropriately, my folks, who, to their credit and with gratitude for myself, have always been unconditionally and lovingly supportive of me. They struggled a bit with my sudden, but not often, spurts of communication about myself. Things like names and pronouns and hormones took years of ideation and percolation in both my own mind and college life to trickle back to my family. And I can imagine it being quite difficult for them to adjust without warning or context. Sometimes I wish I had been given more access to queerness and trans people in my childhood. It took me a long time to figure myself out because I had been without meaningful exposure to any method of being other than the cis heteronormative lifestyle. Nevertheless, and regardless, I am so grateful for the ways my parents have accepted my transition into their lives. My dad has impressed me with his growth and desire to become a meaningful ally. A few months before my college graduation last June, former NBA All-Star and three-time NBA champion Dwayne Wade moved his family out of Florida. And in interviews, he explained this in part by saying that his family, quote, would not be accepted. He is, of course, referring to the sickening policies of Ron DeSantis that aim to erase and eradicate the rights and dignities of queer and trans people across the state, especially those of children and in schools. This impacted Wade because his daughter in 2020, at the age of 12, had come out as transgender and changed her name to Zaya. Dwayne Wade, despite being a prominent face of Black masculinity, athletic prowess, and Miami sports lore, had chosen his child instead of the state that had even renamed a county in his honor. On the day of my graduation, my father shook my hand like a man. And we faced each other, doing our best not to cry. And he told me, "You did this, and no one can take that away from you." And I kept hugging him once, twice, 3, 4 times, because otherwise I would have sobbed. Later that evening, he asked me if I'd heard how Dwayne Wade had moved his family out of Miami. And he muttered, "He's my hero." I smiled, knowing that I had gotten to shake the hand of one of my own.
Unity Church is framed by statements of conscience, known as its end statements. One of those is, generously give and openly receive compassionate care in times of joy, sorrow, and transition. Our compassionate care extends beyond the walls of this church to communities with whom we share a common interest. Each week, the larger portion of our offering goes to these community partners. Mad Dad serves the inner city community of Minneapolis with integrity and dedication by providing community safety protocols along with positive youth programming and job creation. Its core program is violence intervention and interruption. This program treats violence as a disease which Mad Dads confronts face-to-face and works tirelessly to prevent its spread in the community. Its Youth Empowerment Club nurtures attitudes and skills that promote relationship, respect, resiliency, and responsibility. Will the ushers now please come forward? May the work of our hands and the generosity of our hearts be given in gratitude this day. Let the offering now be taken.
Well, I first want to just publicly thank our worship associates who rose to this challenge of writing these reflections. Thank you. Yeah. Take it in. Take it in. Also want to draw your attention to This Week at Unity, which details a lot of important events that are coming up in the next couple weeks. And also to remind you that our weekly orientation session to Unity Church, Finding Yourself at Unity, will meet upstairs in the Gannett Room. The topic, I believe, is congregational care with Reverend Laura Cowton. And the building will be closed this Wednesday in honor of the Juneteenth holiday. There's some wonderful things happening, particularly in Rondo, that you might want to check out. It's hard to believe that it's almost here, but next Sunday is my last Sunday with you all at Unity Church. Service at 10 a.m. The service will include what's called a ritual of release, whereby you release me from my responsibility as your interim minister, and I release you. And we'll celebrate together in the parish hall afterwards. And also a reminder, this week begins General Assembly, which is the annual gathering of Unitarian Universalists all across the country. Originally, in our planning, we were going to have the Sunday morning worship broadcast in parish hall at noon next Sunday. But we're shifting that to the Gannett Room, and it is also going to be available after Sunday. So I would really encourage you to make sure you check it out. Molly House Garden, who's one of our rising stars in Unitarian Universalist ministry, will be preaching that Sunday. So that concludes the announcements. I'm going to invite you all to stand and sing. Is there anything you want to say about this hymn, or you know it? You're going to help lead us through it. Words are in your order service. Well, don't forget to lean into each other, and to lean on each other, because that is what we all need, to lean in, to lean on. And please join with me in extinguishing the chalice as we say these words together. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, and the fire of commitment. These we carry with us in our hearts until we meet again. May it be so. Amen.